Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
You know, every once in a while you find a film and you find an actor who it's just going to end up being a little different than everybody else. It's just going to make it that much more special. And if you're within the sound of my voice, that must mean you're in the seats with once more. As always, my name is Dave Voigt, and I'm the host of this podcast where we sit down with a wide-ranging variety of entertainment industry professionals and we pick their brain about current projects, state of the industry, how they got started, and so very much more, in a light and in a conversational fashion. And if you like how we do things around here, I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that you do, because let's face it, you're listening right now. And if you are listening, keep listening and subscribe. Hit that subscribe button, gives you a 5-star rating on your podcast provider of choice. We're available pretty much everywhere. Places like Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Google, and plus we archive every single one of our episodes over at our In the Seats YouTube channel. So if you give us a like and subscribe there as well, we'd absolutely appreciate it. Also, don't hesitate to check us out on social media. We're on the Facebook, the Twitter, the Instagram, Letterboxd, the TikTok, the Threads, and probably a few other places that I've forgotten about. At In the Seats for all sorts of fun updates, but finally, and I do dare say most importantly, please pay us a visit over at In the Seats, intheseats.ca for all the latest and greatest from the world of film, television, basically the moving image at large. Because guess what? If we love to watch it and write about it and talk about it, we love it even more when you come by and read about it and listen about it. So please do us that kindness and come on and pay us a visit. On VOD platforms tomorrow, it's The Fantastic Edge of Everything, which is a really unique and well-paced coming-of-age drama. It's the story of a teenager who's on the cusp of turning 15, and she's one of those young women who's right on the line between still being a kid and being an adult, and she doesn't know which way to turn, and she's forced to move in with her estranged father and his younger girlfriend after her mother passes away, and she's really navigating life in a difficult way. And I mean, this stars the incomparable Sierra McCormick as Abby, and it's a fantastic performance in a film that I think really deserves to get seen, because again, this is one of those movies that, while we've seen this coming of age story before, we've never seen it told in quite a realistic and very grounded fashion like the filmmakers Pablo Feldman and Sofia Sabella do here. But we had the unique pleasure of sitting down with the star of this film, Sierra McCormick, to talk about the material, getting the job, and just so very much more, including sort of worshipping at the altar of cinema, which we all love to do, especially here at In the Seats. But we had a fantastic conversation with Sierra, and we expect big things for her. I have a feeling that in about 3-4 years, Sierra McCormick is the kind of interview I'm not going to be able to get, because she's going to be a big star, and she's that good too. But go check out Edge of Everything, which I cannot recommend highly enough. It's on video on demand platforms now. But first, enjoy our talk with Sierra McCormick, because quite frankly, I think it's one of the better ones we've done this year. So have fun with it. But I mean, obviously, Sierra, I mean, just first off, just thank you so much for the time today. I mean, and congratulations on this movie. I think it's fantastic.
Thank you.
No,
Thank
I
you. I
mean,
appreciate it.
I guess walk me through, I guess the initial script reading, or sort of the early days of, finding out about this project and getting into this character.
Well, the whole theme of this project for me was friends, honestly, because my friend Anthony, and he plays the kind of gross older guy that tries to get with me in the movie. He's been one of my best friends for like a decade. So he's the one that brought me to the film. So that was already fun. And then in the cast, Emily Robinson, I'd actually known Emily for a really long time because she was on an episode of Ant Farm a decade or so ago. So there was already like a sense of familiarity with some of the people. And when I read the script, it was so grounded and natural and real. It kind of reminded me of, and the filmmakers love those kinds of movies, and so it reminded me kind of of Fish Tank by Andrea Arnold.
Totally, yeah.
Or they were also very inspired by Eliza Hittman movies, and I think those are awesome too. And so reading that and kind of getting that vibe from it was really special. And prior to filming this, a lot of the work I had been doing was, one, it was genre, and so it was horror, and so it was either a very out there sort of headspace to be in, or a very horrific, sad, sort of scared, terrified place to be in. And so this was very refreshing because it was very natural and grounded, and had a wide spectrum of sort of emotions throughout the movie. And then also the stuff I'd been doing prior to this was very solitary. So it was very much me and maybe one other person, or just a lot of me alone in scenes. So the opportunity when I read this to do something that was so centered on friendship, and that teenage friendship and that teenage friend group, and I knew I'd be in a lot of scenes with a lot of other actors my age, that was very appealing, because I hadn't really been doing a lot of stuff that was very much a group effort up until that point. So that was very cool. And also just talking to the filmmakers, Pablo and Sofia, and reading this very personal sort of story of theirs. They shot in their hometown. This whole movie is kind of about growing up in general, but also in this very specific place in Northern California. And so I kind of got to experience a different sort of adolescence growing up in a different place than I had, and from the perspective of people that were born and raised there. And so getting to dive into that was also very appealing. And so when we finally got to shooting, and they scheduled all this wonderful rehearsal time for us that aided performance, when they scheduled all this wonderful rehearsal time for us to really get to know each other, and act as a friend group, and do all these fun exercises to kind of put us back, almost regress a little bit into our teenage selves, that was such a unique and wonderful experience for me as well. So there are a lot of factors that contributed to me being really excited to sign on to this, and I'm so glad I did, because I think the final product is so interesting and touching and unique, but also very relatable to almost everyone if you've been through adolescence.
Oh, 100%. Oh
So
my
I
God,
think,
yeah.
yeah,
And I mean, it's one
yeah,
of those things. Like, I'm glad you brought up the scene with the gross guy, because I was thinking watching it, I was like, ew, like, first of all, ew, but also you
yeah,
must have had sort of that trust level and sort of that second hand. And I mean, I'm kind of curious for you as an actor, because with this character, I don't want to say her barriers are down. It's just like they haven't been built yet, like they don't
yeah,
exist. Like, how
yeah.
important is it to sort of have that level of trust when you're having to go into these sort of moments more or less emotionally naked?
I mean, it's wonderful. In fact, I joke that doing those scenes with Anthony particularly were wonderful, because there's literally no one else I would feel more comfortable having to navigate such an icky, weird sort of exchange with. But at the same time, it was like, oh my God, I'm like kissing my brother,
Right.
because we've been such close friends for so long. I was like, this is so weird. You would never do this with most of your best friends. Like, most people don't have the opportunity to step into these roles and have this play or pretend this very odd sort of interaction with someone that you love so dearly and you're so close with. And I felt very, very seen and protected and safe with the two directors as well. So honestly, I can't say enough great things. There's not a better group of people I could imagine navigating such a sensitive and sort of odd, scene and sort of arc with. Honestly, it was about as wonderful as it could be.
Well, I mean, that's kind of what was really engaging about this film, because I mean, obviously we've seen ones dealing with sort of similar topics before in the past, but we didn't have that sort of overarching, hammer on the head moment of exposition, or sort of this dramatic sort of flourish. It all kind of just
Yeah,
happened. And I mean, and I think
yeah.
that's what made it real. And I mean, how important was it for you to this not be, I want to say movie of the weekish? Because I mean, again, with the subject matter, it could have gone that way very easily.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the way the filmmakers treated that whole arc that Abby has in regards to I can't remember what his character's name is, but Anthony's character. Um because I hesitate, as someone who plays teenagers often as an adult, I'm very careful to I'm very passionate. I'm very careful about how I want to portray teenage sexuality,
Mm.
um, because I don't think that media about teenagers should be devoid of sexuality, because that's very incorrect, and that's such a
True, yeah.
huge part of your adolescent growth is discovering that and navigating that. But I also am careful not to do things that feel exploitative of that. And I'm very mindful of the fact that I'm playing a minor. And so I'm very that's one of my big sort of rules that I have, is that if it feels exploitative, then I don't want to do it. And that's what I love so much about the way this script and the filmmakers chose to portray it. Was it's not exploitative, but it is very real, and it's not romanticized or titillating in any way. It's icky. It's supposed to be, and it feels the way I feel like that whole. It's almost like at the moment, Abby feels like it's so cool and makes her so interesting to have this kind of older guy be interested in her. But as an adult in retrospective, it's very disgusting. It's very icky. It makes me feel creeped out, you know. And so I think that the filmmakers did a really wonderful job of kind of like balancing that, where because the movie is from Abby's perspective and it's all through her lens essentially, portraying how cool that must feel to her, but then also portraying how once she actually gets there, it starts to feel wrong.
Mm.
And I was just very struck by the way that the filmmakers handled that aspect of the storyline particularly, and that made me very excited to sign on and do it as well, is because I felt like it was accurate and authentic, and it wasn't glossed over or prudish in a way, but it was also not exploitative, and it didn't feel like it was for the audience's benefit or anything like
For
that.
sure.
It's more to illustrate, yeah, how gross it is.
No, yeah, and I mean, you all do such a fantastic job with this, and I mean, full disclosure, I've been a fan of yours for a little bit. Like, I love you from Vast and
Oh,
Nights, and I mean,
thank you.
I loved you in V.F.W, and I mean, even with you, I thought that was fantastic. It's one
Thank
of those
you.
things that you've been. It seems like you've been very fortunate to take on roles where you're not kind of being put in the box, as it were. Would that be a fair thing to say? Because I mean, obviously, as an actor, you don't always have choices over the roles you get to take. Sometimes you just have to audition and
Yeah.
get it. But I mean, it seems like you've
Mhm.
been hitting pretty well so far.
I've been very fortunate, and I owe a lot of that to Vast, obviously, because I got to do such intricate and detailed character work, and I was given the space and the support to do that, in the way that I truly like to on that movie, with a lot of prep and a lot of research and a lot of nailing down the details and essentially building a person from the ground up. That's my favorite way to work. And so I think because, and when I toured Vast, when I did all the press and stuff like that, it had been a while since we shot it, but I also made a point to kind of look very different when I was touring it, to kind of hopefully send out the signal to anyone that was watching it or watching me doing press that I really love to dive in and change myself and kind of, you know, cocoon myself in a completely different person. And really build those wonderful details and construct that person. And so I feel like because of that, all of the jobs that I've gotten since then have been filmmakers that love that movie and recognize that that's the kind of work that I like to do. So I have been very fortunate to sort of, after that, get the opportunity to consistently do work that I find fulfilling and interesting. And I get to sort of do it varies from thing to thing. I don't have like a set way that I approach each role, but I've gotten to do that very artistically satisfying prep that I love to do. And so all my roles since then have been wonderfully satisfying and fulfilling and artistically exhilarating, because I think Vast sort of sent out the signal to other filmmakers that that's the kind of work I like to do. And I'm very fortunate that I got to be in that movie, and it's changed my life. And I think it's influenced all the other stuff I've done since. So I would say, yeah, that's definitely something that I really value. And if I had sort of an ethos or something for my career, it would be variety and the details. So I feel very lucky that I've gotten to do that most of the time, more or less.
Well, I mean, I'm thankful for that too, because I mean, full disclosure, I'm here in Toronto, and I remember that year at the festival. Every year, there's
Yeah,
one movie that we're always talking about in amongst ourselves as critics and journalists. It was like, have you seen Vast yet? Holy shit, Vast, good.
it's very exciting. Going to all the festivals with that movie was very, very exhilarating. Honestly, it was very exciting. You could feel the buzz. You could really feel it. It was almost tangible. It was crazy.
No, I mean, I'm curious for you just to start putting a bow on this, because I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but I always
Oh
gotta
no, I got some time.
I always like to ask people, like, kind of what got them into the business. Because I mean, again, like I said, with this, the choices you've made and the stuff you've got to do, it's very character driven and it's very unique and it's always different. I mean, even like VFW, you were on a set with a bunch of grizzled old action veterans, which I can imagine was an experience in and of itself. But
Yeah.
what were the sort of the movies and the moments that wanted you to become an actor?
Oh man, that's such a wonderful, wonderful question. Thank you. Well, I mean, I started very young, so I kind of built what I wanted to do over time as I was working in a way, because when I was a kid, I didn't necessarily view it the same way as I do as an adult. But when I was a kid, I was very outgoing, but I would say I was very lonely. And so I love to talk to people and get to know people and perform for people. But I was kind of a problematic kid in like the classroom and stuff, and so I I was in trouble a lot for acting out, and so once that kind of became a thing that my sort of strict religious school was a little fed up with, they kind of suggested to my mom that I try doing drama club or something to sort of get some of that out, essentially.
Right.
And I grew up in La Quinta in the desert area. And so it's also very, very, very hot over the summers there. And you essentially don't want to be outside at all. You want to be indoors where the air conditioning is. And so, those two things kind of combined made it so that I really threw myself into drama club like during the school year and during the summers. And I just found that I really, really loved it. I loved getting an opportunity to perform. And then on top of that, I really want to credit my parents, my mom particularly, for showing me a really wide variety of films at a very early age. So once I became an actor, specifically, my mom started being like, "Well, you're an actor, you need to watch all these good movies." And luckily, they had the sense to know that they kind of let me watch whatever I whatever I wanted, and they knew to do that with me because I think they knew maybe I could handle it, because they didn't do that to my sister. They kind of regulated what she watched a lot more, but I'd seen like every Arnold Schwarzenegger movie before I was like 10. Like they were big action film fans, and I'd seen Tarantino movies, and I loved Star Wars, and I loved Blade Runner. Blade Runner, I saw that when I was 12, and I'll never forget it just because it made such a huge impact on me. And so I was already acting, and so I wasn't watching a movie and being like, that's what I want to do, because I was already kind of doing it. And I really just loved the experience of being on set. And I've always been like a very old soul in a way. And so at school that wasn't really appreciated, but I felt very seen on set, because all the adults on set were delighted to talk to me like I was an adult. And I really, really valued that. I really appreciated it, because I loved talking about movies and stuff, and I didn't really have an outlet for that at school or anything. And so being on set was already this wonderful, wonderful experience for me as a kid, and I just loved it. And then sort of because I was already in it, I became like I would say like a movie fan, like a student of cinema
Right.
eventually. And I took for granted just how much that experience of watching so many such a wide variety of movies and being exposed to so many different kinds of films at such a young age kind of gave me as I got older, because I had such an interesting sort of just framework for acting. Um, and so as I reached more like being a teenager, I started to really get into cinema and become super inspired by particular performances. But I remember when I was 10 or so, my mom showed me the piano, because she was like,
Wow.
"Oh, there was
Okay.
like a little there." She's like, "There's a young girl in this movie, and she did a really, really good job, so you should see it." But then she was horrified because she forgot there's a Harvey Keitel full frontal in that. I remember her screaming and covering my eyes, which is so funny. But just as an example of how what a wonderful kind of gift she gave me to be showing me such interesting art at such a young age. And so when I got older, I was really able to even further kind of broaden my inspirations. So other films and performances that really inspire me all the time are like the Passion of Joan of Arc, the silent film.
Oh, totally. Yeah, Dreyer. No, for
Yeah,
sure.
I have a Passion of Joan of Arc tattoo actually because it made such a huge impact on me when I saw it when I was kind of like a late teens. Um, and so that and Emily Watson and Breaking the Waves was a
Totally.
huge,
Yeah.
huge inspiration for me. And Andrea Riseborough's just career and how she kind of does what I want to do, and she creates like a brand new person. Like she never repeats herself. Every time I see her on screen, she's completely different, and she blends into the ecosystem of every film that she's in such a wonderful, unique way. So she's very inspiring to me. Gina Rollins in Opening Night
Oh my
is
God.
a
Yeah.
super,
That's,
yeah, super inspiring performance. The movie The Lives of Others, the German film,
oh
is
yeah.
a very that was a huge inspiration kind of for Vast, for some of my performance there, because that movie is so much about listening, and Vast is very much about listening and holding those moments when you're in suspense and you're listening to something, and so that was a huge inspiration as well. I could go on for a really long time about this.
No, but you know
Um,
what? I love those answers because I mean I see a lot of that Andrea Riseborough example in you, and I mean I think that's a great sort of goal to go for. But I mean at the same
thank
time,
you.
I also share the awkward pain of seeing Schwarzenegger movies far too early and having no one to talk about Commando with. So you know,
No, literally. Or I'd go to school and I'd be like, "Have you guys seen What's Eating Gilbert Grape?" And they're just like, "No, like what?" And I don't know. So it kind of definitely I felt a little different at school as a kid for sure, because I was like, "What do you mean you haven't seen Total Recall?" And they're like, "Yeah, my mom won't let me watch that movie." But yeah, I don't know. I think it was I I think I turned out all right. So I think my parents knew what they were doing and did right by me by letting me watch pretty much anything I wanted when I was a kid. And I think it gave me a very, I guess, rich sort of film lexicon to pull from, even at a young age, in terms of performance and just things that I'd seen. So I'm very grateful for that.
now I'm curious because it really feels like to me that having edge under your belt now at this stage will be a good thing because, like you said, you've worked in a lot of genre, and
Mhm.
sometimes that can limit you, but at the same time, if you really know and understand when you're working inside genre, it can be so freeing all at the same time. It's almost like a switch you kind of turn on and off. Like for you, how important is it to sort of, I guess, have this sort of straight dramatic muscle that you exercised here in Edge rather than, it having more of the genre flourishes in like humor or Vast or something like that?
Well, that's something that definitely attracted me to it in the first place, was the opportunity to play something very straight and naturalistic. Because obviously, I inject truth, and or hopefully I do, into everything I do, even in the genre space. But you're often either in a very heightened tone, or you're putting yourself in some insane, fantastical scenario, or there's a level of exaggeration, perhaps, or camp, or whatever it is, because even in Vast, I felt like I was doing very grounded naturalistic work, but I had like a whole setup, a whole thing. I learned this very unique skill. I had this very specific period like wardrobe. I had these big glasses. I had a very specific hairstyle, and I had a whole speaking pattern that I developed with the director, this accent, this way of speaking. And Faye particularly is very, very different from me as a person. And so to me, I was always, injecting truth into it, hopefully, but it was still like underneath all of these things. And so for Abby, it was very interesting because I still did some things. Like I dyed my hair brown because I felt like, I had like this very punky kind of orange color at the time. And I felt like Abby feels like she blends in, and having like bright orange hair didn't really blend in my opinion. And if she feels kind of like she's uncool and she just isn't very interesting and sort of blends into the background, that's why she's so attracted to friendship with Caroline, because Caroline is such a boisterous and free sort of character, and I think Abby really envies that. So I dyed my hair brown. I kind of did my makeup. Our makeup artist Lizzie was very wonderful and let me apply a lot of the makeup, because I feel like there's a very ugly, chunky, amateur way that you apply makeup when you're a teenager. And
Mm.
so I wanted to kind of capture that as well, like to an extent, because I didn't I wanted to make sure it still looked all right on camera, because I was thinking of the makeup I did to take a deep fried photo booth selfie in like 2011 versus being, right up with the camera super close to you, and this beautiful cinematography that our DP Scott created. So I wanted to find a balance between that ugly adolescent makeup and still camera readiness, I guess. So I did a few things, but it was wonderful to sort of live in a very natural, true to life world. Just because a lot of the stuff I've done, like you said, it's all either very heightened or very tonal or kind of exaggerated, or maybe it's naturalistic, like We Need to Do Something is very grounded performances, but putting yourself into the worst, most bleak headspace in the worst, most bleak scenario of all time. And so I really liked the waves of the spectrum of emotion that Edge of Everything kind of offered me, because I got to have those extreme joys of adolescence and then those extreme, like, the world is caving in moments of adolescence. And so it was a wonderful to sort of flex that muscle, like you said, to sort of exercise my ultra dramatic, there's no hint of genre really in it at all, that sort of, like I said, that Eliza Hittman, Andrea Arnold style of filmmaking, where the performances are true to life. So yeah, it was a wonderful experience. It was something that made me most excited about doing the film.
Now I'm curious, where do you ultimately see yourself going with projects that you want to take on? Because I mean, you've been in a very unique position from a young age to see the network TV machine work at full speed, to also see the sort of the Hallmark Christmas movie machine work at full speed, to also
Yes.
working in sort of the indie space. Like, where do you see yourself evolving to as an actor or even as a storyteller? Like, would you want to write or direct one day?
Yeah, all of those things. So I think for me, what I love most about the profession of acting, and despite all the strife, what keeps me passionate and wanting to do it still all these years later, is the fact that I'm not very good at foreseeing the future or looking ahead too much or planning, and I get very bored very quickly doing something that's the same all the time. And so I think that I like the fact that I don't really have to, like, have this 5-year plan necessarily, because like I said, the only thing, the like one ethos I kind of have for my career is variety, is just getting to do something I've never done before. And those opportunities are always gonna come, because there's so many wonderful, new, interesting movies being made all the time. It's more accessible than ever to be able to make a movie. So there's all kinds of fantastic, unique voices, making films. And so I don't really see myself in one particular medium, like film or television specifically. It's more just, my hope really would be that I get to continue doing character driven, interesting work and stuff, something I haven't done before. I love diving in. I love doing the research. In fact, actually, if I were going to say something that I'd like to do the most in the future, it'd be period pieces, because research is one of the biggest satisfying parts of the process for me, is getting to do research about not only, like, specifically like switchboard operation or whatever, but also the time and the place in which people exist. It colors everything about you. And so getting to put myself into the position of what it would be like to be in this particular part of the country or this particular part of the world at this particular time, and looking into the history of the social climate of that time, and how people in small towns, for example, like Vast of Night, like how that life was, because I grew up in Southern California in a not small town. And so getting to really put myself into the position of being like, not only what is 1958 like, and what is New Mexico like at that time, but what is it like to live in this very small Americana, Norman Rockwell almost esque place where everyone knows each other. It's so different and unique and far from me. That's more what I wish that I will be able to do for the next however many years, if I'm lucky, is getting to do the research. And even for something like Edge of Everything, where it's a very current, it's a very current movie. It's not like a period piece or anything. Just getting to do all this interesting sort of data collecting, I guess, in my mind, about what it's like to be a teenager in this particular part of the country. And that's what was so wonderful about the filmmakers, is that they really wrote something that spoke to their exact upbringing in this very particular place. And getting to do work like that is the most exciting and the most exhilarating for me. So I think if I'm lucky and I get to explore more people and places and time periods that I'm not familiar with, that would be the best outcome in my opinion. And yeah, I love storytelling and just the narrative and the visuals and the emotional sort of aspect of filmmaking. And so I think eventually I would probably want to get behind the camera in some capacity, just to try it out, put my own spin on it. I love movies so much, and I say often that before I'm an actor, even I'm like, this is so pretentious and annoying, but before I'm an actor, I'm a student of cinema, honestly, as an
Oh,
art form.
amen. Amen to that, sister, please.
Thank you.
But I mean, I think the last question I gotta ask.
Mhm.
Is the research the creative payoff for you? Because again, it seems like you seem very focused on being able to add those little extra layers of nuance to whatever you do to put something over the top and make it memorable. Because like I said before at the beginning, this role, this character could have been played very differently, but it wasn't. It was played grounded, it was emotional and very sort of humanistic and relatable. And I mean, even as a 40 something white guy, I was like, okay, I've known this girl, I've met this girl, like I get it.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say that the research is one of the most satisfying parts of anything for me. And so that's why, not everything I've done has lent itself to doing extensive research. And so those are the things that maybe I don't feel quite as passionate about. I still love to find something to love and to empathize with everything that I do, and some level of truth to inject into it, hopefully. But the opportunities I get to really dive in and, like I said, kind of create a person from the ground up are the most rewarding experiences in my opinion. And thank you. I'm glad that because I really do try to inject a lot of fine details that I don't know, the camera might miss, but
Right.
it's important to me. Like for this movie, I really wanted to play Abby, someone who wants to be above it all, wants to be too cool for everything, but can't help but not be, can't help but care so deeply about things. And that's why I love the added detail of her goldfish in the movie, is
Totally.
that she wants to come off so cool and so aloof and so above everything, which is something I've wanted to come off. I've wanted to come off that way a lot of my life, especially in adolescence, but I wanted to be so mysterious and aloof, but I'm so fucking outgoing and I can't shut up that it's just never going to happen. But that was something that I really wanted to emulate. I wanted to be so free and so uninhibited and so cooler than everything, the way Caroline kind of is in the movie. And I think that her one sort of crack in that is how much she cares about her goldfish, because I think in the movie it's easy to kind of forget sometimes that she's navigating this intense grief, this loss.
Mhm.
And the goldfish is the one sort of emotional through line, I feel
For
like, where
sure,
she gets
yeah.
to really grieve her mother and grieve the life that she had with her mother, and kind of combine those two horrible things where when someone or something that's really close to you dies, it feels like that part of your life, that happiness that you shared with that person, is over, and this part of your life is done in the past, and that's a terrible feeling. And then also navigating adolescence, you feel like your childhood is over, it's done, it's in the past, but at the same time you're in this halfway space where you don't have the carefree nature of being a child anymore. You have things to worry about now, but you're also not an adult, so you don't have the agency to really care about it the way you'd want to. And so I think navigating both of those sort of in between death of the previous era of your life moments for Abby is hard, because the filmmakers wrote her as someone that really is bottling all of that up and really is keeping it super close to the vest, and having the one sort of through line, the emotional connection, that's the goldfish. And it's funny that they chose a goldfish, because the goldfish is something that I had a goldfish growing up. And it's not like a cat or a dog where it looks at you and it has all this recognition and humanness. Like a goldfish is kind of something that doesn't have a lot of
It's not going to emote.
humanness to
Yeah.
it. Yeah, it doesn't have like a face that emotes, and it doesn't look
Right.
at you with like a certain whatever behind the eyes. And so connecting all of that to this sort of this little fish that has no idea that it's even probably it has no idea who you are was a fun detail for me to explore and um, kind of get to navigate that emotional through line through the goldfish. And you know, even though this role didn't have as much like research, you know, quote unquote, for me to do in terms of time and place and something that's really far from me, it did give me the opportunity to sort of touch back on and like research, I guess, my own adolescence in a way.
Right.
I got I made a playlist of all the music that I listened to at that age. And I went back and went through the horrible fucking ordeal of looking at my social media from that age. I looked at like my deleted Tumblr blog. I looked at my Facebook posts. I looked at my Instagram posts. I looked at all the photos. I backed up my old iPhone with all the photos dating back to like 2011, where I looked at, you know, just what it was like to exist online and with my friends at that time. So that I still, yeah, I still got to do kind of the research that I always liked to do. It was just different. It wasn't about something very far from me. It was about my own past, which is such an interesting. I don't know if I'll ever get that opportunity necessarily again. That's a very unique. I hadn't thought about it until we were talking, but it's kind of unique for me. So somehow I managed to inject the research into everything, I guess.
Well, I mean, I hope you get to do that work again. You mind your soul, and I mean that's what a good actor does. And I mean, honestly, just again, congrats on this film and congrats on everything and the work you've been doing, man. I cannot
Thank you. I
wait
really
to
appreciate
next
it.
Sierra, honestly. Just but keep up the good work, keep shuffling that deck, keep making interesting choices, really.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you. These are wonderful, very interesting questions. You know, when you do press blocks, they can be a little bit monotonous sometimes because you're
Exactly.
answering
Yeah, no, for
the same
sure.
stuff over and over. Yeah, but
I try to be just
these were very,
conversational when I do it, but I mean, thank you very much for saying that too. I appreciate it.
yeah, you're welcome. No, seriously, thank you. Wonderful, wonderful questions. It was a great conversation.
All right. Well, we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much, David.
And don't forget to visit our friends over at Bay Street Video for all your DVD, Blu-ray rental, or purchasing needs this summer, as they are still open for curbside and some mailing delivery as well. Over at 1172 Bay Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, you can give them a call at 416-964-9088. That's 416-964-9088. Or send them an email at baystreetvideoto@gmail.com for any of your DVD and Blu-ray needs.